With the second pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Aiden Hutchinson, defensive end, Michigan.
All righty, welcome in. It's great to be here on this Wednesday on the Maize and Blue Review. A little Michigan football live for you, coming at you. Welcome in if you are listening to the replay of the Michigan football live on Clubhouse. I'm Dennis Fithian. I'm joined by Trevor McCue, the Maize and Blue Review staff writer who you see on the screen and you will hear if you are listening to us via the pod or online, any which way you're out there. Trevor, how are you?
Doing well, Dennis. Yourself?
I'm doing great, man. It's always great to talk about Michigan football. It's one thing that I know for sure that you're here to, and you like talking about the Wolverines, and that's good because the show's called Michigan Football Live. We're a part of the Maize and Blue Review. We're here weekdays at 1 o'clock, and we're part of Rivals.com. So all of that fits into talking about the latest and what's going on with Michigan. And this year, I was just reflecting a little bit over the last 24 hours. I was thinking about the last 15 years and some of the off seasons and what I would be talking about when it came down to Michigan. And it's so drastically different here now because all of those previous years, maybe with the exception of one, I was talking about why Michigan couldn't get it done against Ohio State. What would it take to get it done against Ohio State? The coaching mistakes, the recruiting, the quarterbacks, all of it. And yet, as we know now, it is completely different this time around, and it's a lot nicer this way.
Yeah, it's a little easier to be the defending Big Ten champions, right? Than are we going to get there? What needs to change? Yeah, it's definitely it's a better feeling. I know a lot of Michigan fans are having fun online, being able to maybe talk some smack they haven't too in the past, and there's still a nice optimism around the program that this feels like something that can continue, that it was a culture change that can be maintained and not, a one-off kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of positivity around the program right now, and it's a lot of fun.
Before we go any further, I want to let you know about our new sponsor. Hey, folks, Dennis Fithian, and support for the Maize and Blue Review is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's Performance Package, the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join me and over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code TMBR at manscaped.com. And if you've ever heard someone ask if the curtains match the rug, in this case, yes, they do. I can tell you that. As we take a look at it here, there's Trevor. Get 20% off at Manscaped. Free shipping with the code TMBR at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code TMBR. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Okay, now we get to some Michigan football talk, and we have Trevor sitting back there with us, and we were looking back to this past year. Yeah, I think the mood when it was, you'd say, well, was it a quick off season? Was it a slow off season? I think all the times before it was a very slow off season. At some point, you'd wake up in the morning and say, are they ever going to be able to get it done? Yeah, it really challenges everything if you're a sports fan and a Michigan fan. And even though at different times over the years you thought, before the season, they had their best chance, man, a coaching change, Michigan with a returning quarterback, Michigan looking like they had the personnel. There were a couple of those cases, and then that went out the window pretty quick. And then there were a couple other years where things you didn't have any expectations heading into the year. And then as the season went along, you're like, you know what? You just got to focus in on what's happening here. Michigan has a really good chance. It was just was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago when they went down to Ohio State. Ohio State wasn't playing really well. And, Michigan was the favorite in that game. And of course they lost it.
Yeah, that's 2018. That was, I'd argue, the turning point into the drastic changes we saw at the end of 2020. Because, yeah, you're right. Michigan was the favorite in that game. That was the revenge tour year. I mean, we felt as good as we could feel going into Columbus. I still remember watching the pregame show, and even Herbie was like, yeah, like just reserved. Michigan's going to win this game. And they lost in really, really ugly fashion. And like I said, I think that led into 2019, which was a lot of not meeting expectations. Obviously, the COVID shortened year, going 2-4 in 2020 was like, okay, something's got to change. So I think that was the biggest thing I recognized last year very early on was it wasn't just, hey, we hired a bunch of young coaches and this is what we're going to do now. Seeing Harbaugh, lack of a better term, I'm going to say loosen up, and in ways that maybe don't mean a lot to people outside of Michigan, but things that we recognized right away, right? So the guy's super competitive, but that means he's also kind of locked into tradition and superstition, right? So seeing the blue pants and some of the uniform things that were happening was like, oh, that's interesting that he's lightening up on that. And then even the way he was dressing, he'd kind of become a character with, you know, his sweatshirt, the same one he's had since Stanford, and the khaki pants. And he was just showing up wearing Michigan sideline gear. And I know that didn't mean much, but I thought that was interesting, just that loosening up. And then obviously I think at Wisconsin, when Michigan took over jump around on the sideline, that was like the big light bulb for everyone when it was like, okay, this is going to be different this year. And it was. It played a big part in, you know, overcoming the adversity against Penn State and winning that game. A lot of people gave Cade McNamara slack for what he said after the game, that in previous years they wouldn't have won. But I think he's right. He's 100% right. It was getting that monkey off the back, you know, winning the tough road game, winning the ranked game, winning as an underdog, and then, yeah, beating Ohio State, winning the Big Ten, getting to the playoff.
Yeah, I'll buy all those little things that you said. And I remember listening to Aiden Hutchinson said it a million times. They said, when did you know that there was a difference? And he said, right in spring ball. You know, everybody focused in. They started playing music. You could tell they all pointed to the energy of the young staff and the coaches. And, you know, heading into the season, we heard a lot of that, but a lot of that gets chalked up to, you always hear that, like, okay, yeah, they're excited. They've got a lot of energy because, you know, they've had a lot of turnover on the staff because the year before it wasn't all that hot and the coach was under a lot of pressure. I mean, that's the way I was looking at it. But all those little things, you know, the dancing at Nebraska, all those things that you mentioned. And for me, even though it was a little frustrating at the beginning when Michigan was just running the ball over and over and over again, you're thinking at some point you're going to have to start throwing it. That was really forging their identity and really all the way through, you know, to the Ohio State game. We said, why did they win the Ohio State game? It was dominating the line of scrimmage and running the ball. And you could go through a lot of those other games, even though, you know, Penn State, they ended up having that big 49-yard, you know, touchdown, 47 to Eric All. The previous 5 or 6 plays, it was all running the ball. I thought they were just going to try to run it down the field. And, you know, that was such a big key to them, is getting that identity. And it's very much old school. It very much is Harbaugh. Even though we were talking about speed and space with Gaddis, and you got to bring it into the 21st century. This was a total throwback team last year. And I still think about that as we're sitting here in the middle of May, getting close to late May now.
Yeah. And I think, you know, early on, people's concern was, yes, we're winning, but we were thinking ahead to like, okay, if they can't throw the ball, like this is going to be a problem in these different games. And they started sprinkling everything in, you know, the pro spread term was something that I got, you know, heard thrown around a few times. And you're right. There was the old school element, the run the damn ball, right? That was part of it, but you could really see how this was a team effort on the offense. You know, a lot of the blocking schemes, I did an article on this, came from Sharon Moore's time in Oklahoma. You know, if you watched Adrian Peterson play, you recognized a lot of these pin and pull techniques they were doing. Mike Hart's fingerprints were all over the running backs last year in terms of the patient running and the way they held onto the ball. And then Matt Weiss, obviously, coming from Baltimore, and some of the analytical and strategic things that he implemented. So Harbaugh's first year, the team got better every game. Like that was, you started to see the plan come. I mean, in previous years, that didn't seem to happen. And that's what it was last year. You started to see the plan evolve every week and started to see, okay, this is, you know, where we're heading. And against Ohio State, there was running up the gut, but there was some creativity. You know, there was some RPO, there was some end arounds. It was a good mix of everything. And now heading into this year, and Matt Weiss moving into that OC play caller role and a lot of the talent coming back on offense, they're still going to run the ball. That's never going away. Harbaugh wants to run the ball. But I think we're going to see even another step, and I hope we do. I think we'll be concerned if we don't, if the offense doesn't take that next step in terms of being, creative and, explosive, which they were last year.
Yeah, that was going to be the next part here. Do you think, I wonder how much you think is going to carry over? And when you talk about creativity, the Ohio State game was excellent in a lot of ways. The snow coming down and the way Michigan played and everything else. But the way that the Gaddis called that game, yeah, it was running the ball. But I was just rewatching some of the first half the other day. And at one point, Joe Klatt's like, they'll throw the kitchen sink. I mean, they might as well, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they did. Gaddis was, throwing the ball down the field when, they're going for it on a fourth down. And that was all in the first half. You would think, personnel wise, that they've got the feeling and confidence now. They know that they can do it. They returned most of the offense here. They've got the very manageable schedule. You would think that all of those things, it would be a continuation and then adding on even to be a more explosive offense. And that, that's when you hear that, people say, "Well, you sounding like this is, really a lot of putting a lot of shine on the maize and blue." But that all sounds very reasonable to me after what we saw last year from them and knowing what they have returning.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think that's homerism. You just got to look at it on paper and common sense here. If the best offensive line in the country is bringing back 3 of the 5 and replacing your departing center with arguably the best center in the country, who's a Remington Award finalist, right? And you've got Trenty Jones and, competing at right tackle, a guy that was on the field a ton last year and they're really positive about. O-line should be better. Wide receivers have nearly everyone but Dalen Baldwin back, and you're bringing Ronnie Bell back. Tight ends, Eric All, Schoonmaker, young guys coming in. And then, yes, you lose Hassan Haskins. But we saw enough last year to feel like a healthy Blake Corum and more Donovan Edwards is going to be arguably the best running back deal in the country. So I don't think it's unfair to say, hey, we need you to do what you did last year and more on offensive side of the ball. And that's because if we get through those first few games that we're expecting to be, I don't want to say easier, but, being able to really learn some things. If they go through those first few games and are struggling, it's going to raise some red flags of concern for sure.
Yeah, those games should be easy. Colorado State should be easy. Hawaii and UConn, easy. I'll say even Maryland.
Yeah.
That should be a relatively easy game. Michigan should blow all those teams out. What are we talking about here? Yeah, they better not think that. They better approach it like they need to take it, that particular game. But we can look at it. Those first 4 games are all cupcakes, and they should be able to play everyone and go down to Iowa to start October out with, being 4-0, being a top 5 team likely in the country. And then it's on. What about this next season? We're getting into it right now. A very easy start and very nice. You just look at the away games, Iowa. It started out in October. Indiana, Rutgers, that last one against Ohio State. Those are nice road games. And then you look at those home games, it sets up. Is it set up perfect? It sets up nicely, at least as nice as it can, as we talk about it here in the offseason.
Yeah, it's hard to complain. The reschedule that we saw inserted a bye week before the MSU game, which they also have a bye week before that game as well. So that is going to be a long 2 weeks leading into that game against Michigan State.
I like it.
But yeah, I do too, for sure. Obviously, we've talked about the Iowa game before and playing at Iowa and, tension with that. But I think what the team accomplished last year gets a lot of those bad thoughts out of their head where now, look, we've done this, right? They're going to go into Iowa. They're going to beat Iowa. Penn State seems to be kind of a trade-off one year to the next. That I don't expect it to be easy, but feel better about that being at home. And then, yeah, you're finishing the year with a Nebraska team people expect to be better, but Illinois before going to Columbus. So, I'll have to see. But right now, my money's I would expect them to be 11-0 going to Columbus with another matchup to win the division. Maybe they're 10-1 because you dropped the Iowa game or can't get past Michigan State this year or whatever. But it's lining up where they should be able to go 11-0 if they meet expectations.
I like that talk. I like 11-0 talk. You can say it, and I think I agree with you. And I just look back to last season, the Rutgers game. After they didn't score a point in the second half. That was a tough game. I mean, that was one that in the past you had to be sitting here thinking this is the kind of game Michigan loses. In Nebraska, things were looking good, but there were a couple points. I don't know, 5-10 minutes of real time in the second half where I thought, oh, this is the kind of game Michigan loses in the past. They're going to lose that game. There's two of them. The Northwestern game, I didn't know if they were going to lose it, but it was only 10-7 at the half, and I thought this is a agonizingly painful game to watch. It ended up being easy in the second half. The Penn State game, easily they could have lost that one. Ohio State, and I know people showed up, packed the stadium, and it was one of the greatest wins of all time, but it really, even though things were looking great into the fourth quarter, there were still thoughts there somewhere. I mean, they had to be, unless you're, some people are able to just, hey, I'm not considering losing. But even into the fourth quarter, I thought, they could lose this game still. That's a lot of, there's a lot of close games, and yet here we are talking about, hey, look at the schedule, breezing through 11-0, 10-1 sounds like and I agree with you on all that.
Yeah, the Big Ten is hard, right? Playing a Big Ten schedule every week is hard. I don't think 2016 was probably the one year where I felt like there were very few games I was stressed out, right? Until Iowa, I think. And you're right, there was a lot of close games, but I think, luck is part of it sometimes. I've done a lot of research on last season going into this year, and I'm surprised often when I see a lot of analytics services had Nebraska and Michigan State very close in terms of analytics, and you couldn't have had two different season outcomes, right? So when you're playing within a touchdown every game, one bad bounce, one mistake, whatever, can completely derail a season, right? So yeah, like you said, if they don't stop Rutgers like they did in the second half, if they don't hit Eric All against Penn State, you start thinking about, man, maybe they're 8-4, and what are we talking about today instead of defending Big Ten champions? But I think coming into this year, now that they've done it, right, and that was, like I said earlier, what Cade said that people kind of pushed back on. Now that they've told themselves, hey, we can win these close games, and I think they learned a big lesson against Michigan State too, losing that game the way they did. A lot of the players said they don't know that if they would have beat Penn State or if they would have beat Ohio State, if they didn't lose that MSU game the way they did. You talk about sometimes you learn a lot from one game. I think the culture of the program learned a lot from last season. And as long as they follow through on that, I think they can build something. And that's why we're optimistic about saying things like 10-1 and 11-0 going into Columbus, because the offense is back. The defense, yes, lost a lot, but implemented a scheme quickly that worked really well. That scheme goes into year 2 under a new DC with Jesse Minter. We're seeing a lot of guys stepping up that need to step up, and it's hard to not be optimistic right now, and the expectations are high, and they should be. And I think, in Schembechler, they feel it and they know it. Nothing
wrong with feeling and looking optimistic. Trevor, great job. I could talk to you for hours on end.
For sure.
We've got some feedback coming in, and hopefully I'll be able to pop up and we can test our launch here of Clubhouse in just 1 second. So it would be nice to be able to see it. We might have it all here. This might be a groundbreaking day. You talk about the optimism that will be flying through the Michigan Football Live show. If I can hear you coming through the app here in a minute or two. So great job. Love your work on the Maize and Blue review. Enjoy working with you. It's been a fun off season. We'll do it again.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
All right. See you. There he is, Trevor McCue. It's great having him on here. If you hear me mentioning about the feedback, do have some feedback coming in. I'll call it the traditional way if you're watching, where you see a Trepa. If you're watching this, he is put some feedback in. We take the feedback in real time. And Trepa saying, look at how long it took Harbaugh to get it right with his coaching staff. That staff has already had major changes. Will it hurt the team in 2022? That is that's an excellent question, Trepa. and you're talking about the staff here in not only Josh Gaddis, but also losing Mike McDonald as the defensive coordinator. So yeah, you've got two your coordinators that you're talking about losing. Sean Nua on the defensive line. And so those are three coaches, both coordinators. That is one of the, and you say, well, how could it go sideways for Michigan? You say, well, everybody pointed to the young, energetic staff last year, and both coordinators, there could be a learning curve with that. This is Trevor McCue right here. Trevor, are you on the line?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can.
Hey.
I see you. I see you through my app. It's a still picture, but I can hear you, and you can hear me okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Tell me if you hear this. Let me try a few things here. Just a little tester. I'm going to play something.
Second pick in the 2022 NFL Draft.
Can you hear that?
The Detroit Lions select Aiden Hutchinson.
And so then you'll be able to hear this music, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, you also are listening. Let me take you away down. Can you disconnect through, because I see your picture here on StreamYard. Just use the app. I want to see if it continues. Okay, so you're gone there. So you are just coming through the app. I can hear you again?
Yeah.
Look at that. And let me try the music one more time. You hear that?
Oh, Van Halen, buddy.
Van Halen, look at that. You didn't even know it. How about that? Flying high. Well, so great news. I'm going to thanks, Trevor. I know you got to get to work, but it was.
Can I answer that coach's question first, though?
Yeah, go ahead, Trevor. Go ahead. He says this staff has already had major changes with the coaching staff. Will that hurt this upcoming team? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, coaches moving on to new opportunities is never going to be a bad thing. One thing I think Harbaugh's done a good job at through the years is who he replaces with. And I think you could argue he maybe kept some people too long, and it led to some bad things in the past. But yeah, losing Gaddis, I think keeping Moore offsets that loss completely. There's, some more elements there that we could talk about, but I think keeping Moore is a big deal. I think Weiss moving into that role is only going to see, more expansion of, like I said, some of the strategic things that he touched on last year. So I don't see any hiccups with the offense. And the same thing on defense. McDonald moving on to a great opportunity to go back to Baltimore. You get Minter, who was already somebody they were considering adding to the staff to begin with. You're continuing the scheme and terminology over. Mike Elston is a guy who we've already seen a huge impact on the recruiting trail, taking over for Nua, who has experience being a DC, huge recruiter in the area. You're not downgrading anywhere. So yeah, you lose people. You're always going to lose people. There's a lot of turnover in college football, but if you can maintain the culture that you've built and just plug in new pieces that are arguably even better, I think you have nothing to be worried about there.
Excellent job. And thanks. This went a lot smoother than I thought. And I'm excited. Thanks so much for testing out the Clubhouse app with us as well. All right. Have a great day, Trevor.
You too, man.
Great stuff. I could talk to him. That's no lie. Just sit around and it's good. You sit around talking Michigan football all day long. Trevor McCue. He's good. A writer. Go to the Maize and Blue Review. He's got, stories, I say every other day, every other day. He's putting up there and talking Big Ten football, talking Michigan football. And he gets the nuts and bolts and the technical stuff. I can tell that that's his forte, lining up on somebody's inside shoulder, things like that. Things that I'm not going to say I fake it, but I don't know. I'm not sure I know all the techniques as much as Trevor. Probably played it. I didn't ask him that. He's gone now. And probably has. I think he's got a football background. He must. So the exciting news, if you are watching or listening right now, I love taking the feedback and reading it as it happens on the air. If you're watching this, we're here every day at 1:00. I can also tell you now that if you would like to participate in the show via audio and you don't have to call in, it is going to the app Clubhouse. And it is an extremely easy app to use. I downloaded it yesterday. I went there and they ask for your cell number and, they kick you a code and then you're in. And then you line up in the room. And then by you being there in the room, figuring out if you want to make a call or not, I guess I have to figure out whether I want to add you or not, to be on. And I think by leaving a message, I should be able to do that. It's you can say, "Hey, put me on, coach. Put me in, coach." That will get done. So go to Clubhouse and download that app. If you're anybody that ever wanted to get in, talk a little Michigan football, we'll do it every day. So exciting stuff as it comes down and pertains to now being able to take some calls. I am excited about that. What I was not excited about last night was the Eastern Conference Final playoff game. And before that, the NBA draft, which I was hoping the Pistons were going to get one of the top 3 picks. As you know by now, they end up at number 5. And I thought that this particular draft, just looking at it, and we always know that things can change, and look to last year, or look at where, some of the different guys were drafted and what everybody thought, things do change. And so we do know that. And yet by looking at it, this was a draft to me, and people have already said different things. I've heard, experts that have been around the game longer than me and draft analysts saying different things than I was. But I looked at it as a 3-man draft where if you had a top 3 pick, which the Pistons were hoping for, if they would have ended up with any of the top 3 picks, it would have been amazing. And why I say it was a top 3, because I have CBS Sports Line's Gary Parrish's mock draft out. And I agree that the Magic are going to take Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga. But if the Pistons would have ended up anywhere 1, 2, or 3, they would have been happy with Chet Holmgren. I know some people might not have been, but I would have been. Paulo Banchero from Duke. If the Pistons would have been 3rd and he would have fell into their lap, I think that would have been great. In this particular mock draft, Jamari Smith ends up 3. If the Pistons would have ended up with the 3rd pick and they would have had Jabari Smith, Banchero, or Chet Holmgren, it would have felt like, having the number 1 overall pick. Those guys are 1A, 1B, and 1C. So if you had one of the top 3 picks, you were golden. You're looking great. It felt like you had, the first overall pick. Meanwhile, they end up finishing 5th. And so the first tier is 1, 2, 3, and it cuts off. It was a 3-man draft. But this next particular tier, it's a 3, 4, maybe even 5. And, the Pistons will pick 2nd in that tier in this particular mock draft. Jaden Ivey from Purdue. And Big Ten fans will be very familiar with the guard from the Boilermakers, 6'4". He can get downhill. You watch him at times, this guy looks like an NBA player. I mean, he gets downhill. He can drive the basket. He's got the athleticism. I mean, he's got all of that. That's why he's being picked so high in the draft. There were some times watching Purdue that I expected Ivy to take over more, that to hit bigger shots. There were a couple shots that he hit, though, when you watch him, like he looks like Jordan. The way he, would rise and fire on somebody, or the way that he would drive the lane, very explosive. A little bit more consistency that way. If Jaden Ivey ended up getting to the Pistons at 5, that would be awesome. I think it is going to go out and play out this way with Ivey going 4. And in this particular draft, the Pistons select Keegan Murray out of Iowa. So another Big Ten player. And Murray seems like a traditional Pistons pick. He was somebody that coming out of high school was not a 5-star, was not a 4-star. I don't know if you would put him I don't think you would have him as a 3-star. Keegan Murray had one not Big Ten. I'm sorry. Keegan Murray had one Division I offer coming out of high school, Western Illinois. And then when he played last year with the Pistons, second round pick, Luka Garza, he barely played. He's got a twin brother. His brother's a lefty and Keegan's the righty, but Keegan Murray came on this year and tripled his production and everything, scoring, rebounding, assists. I mean, he essentially has come out of nowhere and had this dominating season last year. But as you watch him, he can do everything that you want. He's got nice size at 6'8". You see his shot. It looks easy that he can expand that 3-point range to NBA range. And the thing that I liked about him watching him in the Big Ten is that Iowa at different times, they could just throw the ball to him. Like he would just post up, but not with his back to the basket. He would just post himself up down on the block and they would just throw it up to him and he would just out jump anybody. And he could do that from anywhere in a half court setting. Like get the ball to Murray, just throw it up to him. And he would just skyrocket and just go up and grab it and then face up. He did have a back to the basket type game. So he can do all those things. But you would even see it even before they would get to half court at times watching the Hawkeyes this year. And they like to run with McCaffrey's offense, that Murray would be out ahead and they would just throw it up to him again in that situation. And he could just go up and just snatch the ball and grab it. Not so much for alley-oops. He did that, but he could just go get it. And I like that part from him. And if it's not Murray, the interesting player here, yeah, he's a wild card, Shaedon Sharpe. He didn't play at all at Kentucky. So you're going on everything that you saw from him in high school, but already looking at some of his measurables, his let's say his vertical. He's got like the greatest vertical that I've ever seen. I mean, he is just Mr. Explosion. So I don't know what kind of jumper he has. I've never seen him play, but you know, he was one of the top players coming out, didn't play at all for Kentucky as a freshman. He got in there in January and just decided, heck, I'm going to be a lottery pick, the hell with it. And so there he is. The Pistons, you know, you work him out. Could I see the Pistons saying, let's go with a guy that could be the best player in the draft, or going with the more sure thing in Murray? Yeah. But so you end up at number 5. It might not be all that bad. I wanted a top 3. The rest of these guys, Abaji, we saw in the tournament. Johnny Davis from Wisconsin. I don't think the Pistons would go that direction. So I think it's going to come down to Keegan Murray, Shaedon Sharpe, or if somehow Jaden Ivey got to him. I think if I have to predict one of those 3, we say, well, that's pretty easy at 5, picking one of those 3. Yeah, well, we know who the top 3 picks are going to be. So I'll say it's going to be either Ivey or Murray if I have to go to 2, but I'll go to a third one and Sharpe. So I'm pretty confident. I will put all of my draft money and prediction on it being one of those 3 players. Let's say all 3. Let's say somehow, you know, Johnny Davis has a great workout and goes to the Kings. I mean, it's Sacramento. They do a lot of stupid things. And so let's say they went with Johnny Davis. And so if all 3 players were there, who would I take? I would take Ivey. And I would take them in this order: Ivey, Murray, and Sharpe. The one thing about it, as we're projecting, and you're going to listen to any analyst project and see, like you can go back and probably watch some of Sharpe's high school film. Unless we're there at a workout. And workouts are tricky because sometimes guys go in there and he's got he's going to test off the charts. He's this great athlete. He's going to come down to, you know, some, you know, 780s or something, you know, knock a bunch of 3s down and do everything. You know, he could test fabulously, but unless we're sitting down there and watch some of these workouts, you know, it's tough for me to put him in front of Keegan Murray, who I've watched play a lot. I watched him win the Big Ten tournament, watched him in the tournament. Sad but true, I took Iowa to make the Final Four this year. And guess what? A lot of it on what I saw from Keegan Murray throughout the year. It didn't work out that well for me, did it? But I like Murray. I think he will ultimately be the pick. But like I said, I'd take Ivey if all 3 of those guys were there. All right. Thanks to Trevor McCue. If you are out there, don't forget, sign up for the way to get in and talk with us on the show. That's Clubhouse. And until then, we'll be back here tomorrow. Is it already Wednesday? We'll be back with Jim Scarcelli, the former Wolverine. We'll be talking some Michigan tomorrow. So thanks for joining us. Until tomorrow, everybody have themselves a great day. And don't forget, when it comes down to the Maize and Blue Review, when you're thinking about Father's Day, you're thinking about birthdays right around the corner, graduation presents. My birthday is in June, so maybe I'm just thinking about myself. And for the Michigan fan in your life, forget the ties, forget the golf balls. How about a subscription to the Maize and Blue Review? All day long, all night, talking about the latest and what's going on with Michigan, michigan.rivals.com. Send that present out to the Michigan fan in your life. Also, subscribe on YouTube, and get us on the other various socials. And guess what? Tomorrow, you're going to see that is going to say sign up to Clubhouse, because you'll be able to join us via a phone call. All right. So all of that available to you. Exciting. Very exciting. All right. Take care. We'll talk with you soon. And